Crisis on Earth X, which was originally supposed to be called something different, and I really had to fight the urge to make an X symbol. We have come to one of the iconic pre-Crisis Crisis on Infinite Earths crises. This is one whose name has made its way outside of the confines into adaptation and can be a bit more colloquially known. Now, we've been going through the classic Crisis events leading up to Crisis on Infinite Earths, the ones that have Crisis in the title. It's not every single JLA/JSA team up. However, I know some of you really want to see those, so either we'll come back at the end or I'll hold some votes for what we can start to cover in between. But as for this one, we even have the Nazi supercomputer say Crisis several times. And yes, I know in Justice League 91, Batman comes in cheekily saying, "We have a super crisis," but it's not in the title. We'll come back. We have a mission. We're going to finish this. It's not going to be the clay list. Now, this Earth X crisis sticks with people and has inspired multiple adaptations of or uses of the Earth, some higher profile than others. Some that people may immediately think of is the fourth Arrowverse crossover, which went big, bombastic, had multiple components. There was an animated segment. And then there's also the more recent time of recording Peacemaker Season 2, which set up a whole reveal about taking place on Earth X. Although many people did guess it beforehand, it took the tact of presenting an Earth that wasn't too overtly different at first. Also, James Gunn has cited the Man in the High Castle as more of a source of inspiration than this original comic. But today, we're going back to the source that started it all. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and it's time to vibrate to some other dimensions. They will never let the vibrating go, and I'm so glad they got the good vibrations. Crisis on Earth X begins in Justice League of America 107 from 1973. It's written by Len Wein with pencils by Dick Dillon and inks by Dick Giordano. Like many of these crises, it takes place within the annual JSA team-up, which is what kicked off these Crisis events with Crisis on Earth 1 back in 1963, so a decade prior. Now, when it comes to 107, it was coming out not too long after the last team-up, which happened to be issue 100, so they kind of went pretty hard for that. It was a 3-issue extravaganza. They did things like reintroduce the 7 Soldiers of Victory and gave some new backstory, and overall it had done well. So going into this one, there's a bit of an okay, top that energy. We learn about that in the introduction by Len Wein, present in the Crisis on Multiple Earths Volume 3, which collected these team-ups. They also reprint it in Crisis on Multiple Earths Crisscrossed, and they have the Crisis title because that is a better header than annual JLA JSA team up. That's not as exciting, even though I'd still buy it. Now, the cover of 107 is one that shows you right away that once more we're going to be pulling up some not used / obscure heroes. In this case, a bunch of the heroes from Quality Comics, who DC, at the time National Comics when they purchased them, had acquired the rights to in 1956. This was after Quality had gone bankrupt, but they hadn't done too much with them. There were some they kept running, like Blackhawks, and by this point they'd already reintroduced Plastic Man, but overall it wasn't as though they were constantly running around the DC universe. Now, on the conception of the idea, Len Wein had stated that editor Julius Schwartz had said, "Last year's crossover sold like a son of a gun, and the readers loved it. Go top yourself." So he stated, "I was tempted to tell Julie to go top himself, but he was my boss and I loved him. Besides, I love to challenge more." As a collector, I had always been a fan of the old Quality Comics line, publishers of Plastic Man and Black Hawk and GI Combat, and many other favorites from the 1940s until the early 1950s. When Quality folded, DC had acquired the rights to their titles and continued publishing several of them, especially the ones I just mentioned. The Quality characters seemed the next likely choice for revival. I went through the list of Quality characters and settled on the 6 you're about to meet. So we're about to enter another scenario where we get to see past fandom revive some characters. That's why I always hold out hope for some that vanish. They can always come back. Somebody somewhere loves them. So as for the characters presented, roll call, I'll go in the order that they're presented on the cover. The Human Bomb, Roy Lincoln, who debuted in Police Comics #1 in 1941. Next, Phantom Lady Sandra Knight, in a recreation of her first costume, but with the added seduction quality of her second costume, with the cutout. She debuted in the same issue as the Human Bomb. Phantom Lady has an interesting publication history because of confusion or perhaps some snatching over rights, and some of her covers in her second run over at Fox Feature Syndicate are ones that are included in the whole Senate hearings and critiqued by Wortham. Specifically, you'll see a reference to the cover for issue 17. Next, Dollman, my beloved, who we've done a retrospective on, Daryl Dane, who debuted in Feature Comics 27 in 1939. Next, we have Uncle Sam, who debuted in National Comics #1 in 1940. Then we have the Ray, Happy Terrill. This is the first Ray. There'll be later versions. For a couple of these, they're going to become legacy characters and have multiple versions. This original Quality Ray debuted in Smash Comics #14 in 1940. And finally, onto the Black Condor, who I hope bonded with Phantom Lady over the skimpiness of their costumes. They can start a scantily clad club. This is Richard Gray Jr., raised by Condors and debuting in Crack Comics #1 in 1940. He assumed the identity of a U.S. senator he failed to save, so he's got a triple identity. And I like to think that he's constantly wearing that costume underneath. Now, the cover to Justice League 107 also doesn't bury the lead as to what the problem is. It flat out says that this is a world where the Nazis won World War II. So SOS, send help. Wein was also forthcoming about the creative decision to set it in this way, and no, there is no mention of the man in the high castle. He stated, "Since the quality characters had known their heyday mostly during the Second World War, I contrived a way to set my story in a world where the war had ended very differently." So essentially, specifically for these characters, it's meant to be a way to present them at their height, so that they have a reason to still be active, and then everything else spreads outward. The story will come to explain how this history came to be, albeit very loosely. The title page is also quite dramatic. The returning heroes up among the clouds, the more well-known heroes of the JLA and JSA down on the ground fighting a Nazi tank with giant swastikas emblazoned on it. And there were meant to be more, because initially this Earth was gonna have a different name. It was initially pitched as just being Earth Swastika. Whedon stated, "I titled this year's extravaganza Crisis on Earth Swastika Symbol and turned the script into Julie. He loved it, with one small exception. Having lived through World War II, Julie had a rightly understandable antipathy toward the symbol of Nazi tyranny. No story I ever edit will include that symbol in the title, he told me, even as he scratched it out. But after Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, and all the others, it seemed the perfect choice, I argued. If we can't use the swastika, what do we call the world?" Julie thought about it for a moment, then used his pencil to erase each of the crossbars on the swastika. "There," he said proudly, "Earth X is as good a name as any." Regardless of whether that's exactly how it happened or not, just from a practicality standpoint, calling it Earth X makes more sense, because as soon as you introduce a symbol into the title, there's always the question of how are you supposed to say it. Although, it must be noted that there already was an Earth X at this point. You saw it in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 93, from the year 1966. The Batman Superman of Earth X. It's a story where Jimmy gets transported to another dimension. Later on, when they're labeling these Earths, they'll label that one Earth X1, and the one we're about to look at, Earth X2. Marvel also had an Earth X. That's a series from 1999 that had a bunch of spin-offs, and the original is actually really solid. Maybe one day. But now, with the history accounted for, let's take a look at this adventure. The story opens on Earth 2, so the Golden Age Earth. Earth 2 Superman is initially missing the graying on his temples, and then he later has them. It happens a few times. This is the first issue that Earth 2 Cal has them. Before that, he didn't, and it was very confusing. Earth 2 Superman first debuts in Justice League of America 73 in 1969. And over time, they really start to ramp up the small visual cues to the difference, because at the start, as stated, it's not there, and it can be a bit hard to follow sometimes. Now, on Earth 2, they're showing off this new device. They have one Earth 1 too, but we're on Earth 2. It's a transmatter cube, even though they don't call it that yet. And they're getting ready to test it out. It's a device that through vibration will allow them to teleport to another Earth when they feel like it. So now it's not just people who can already vibrate, people who can will it, people with magic, or just a certain time of year. Now they can control it, but still vibrate. Huzzah. On Earth 1, they're also setting up for the swap. And Red Tornado, who had been going through it at this period in DC Comics history, is really sad that he can't go. He's feeling othered. Lots of feeling ostracized because he's an android, and Hal does not help. "But you must let me volunteer for this test, Green Lantern. It may be my only hope of piercing the dimensional barricade that keeps me prisoner on your world." We understand that, Red Tornado, and we sympathize, but we still can't allow it. We've run this test on inanimate objects, lab animals, and now with humans, but unfortunately, my android friend, you are not human. Wow, Hal, just call him a clanker, why don't you? So, the heroes being sent across Earths are, from Earth 1, Batman, Green Arrow, and Elongated Man. From Earth 2, Superman, Sandman, and Dr. Fate. The Flashes are manning the machine, which is appropriate since it's their encounter that really starts off these types of adventures. However, our heroes do not materialize on the other Earths, but somewhere else. And they do some really nice parallel paneling during this sequence. Now, they do all still end up together, and it's quickly revealed what went wrong. Red Tornado. He snapped. No. Red Tornado decided that he still really wanted to go and so snuck on. And even though he should have known better, his presence ruined the calibration of the machine. And so they ended up somewhere. He's lucky they didn't emerge as some kind of amalgamous blob, like Gumby, or slowly start turning into each other, like the Fly. Now they are quickly interrupted by a bunch of tanks, very overtly branded tanks. And so they spring into action. Superman's really into it. He's having a great time. "Rotzi, I don't know where you've been hiding all these years, but I cut my baby teeth on skunks like you." I like that Dr. Fate says, no, it's not fun, it's nostalgia. However, the nostalgia is interrupted when Dr. Fate finds that his magic doesn't quite function right here. The battering ram that he tries to send, it ends up hitting Superman instead. Because, you gotta nerf Dr. Fate early, otherwise he could probably solve most problems. These Ratsies, as Superman calls them, even though I keep saying Ratsies, also have more advanced tech, which leaves the hero seemingly defeated. But then, here comes the Freedom Fighters. Now, issue 107 takes these 6 heroes and reimagines them as one combined team. Whereas during the actual Golden Age, they function independently, and as mentioned, were in different books a lot of the time. 6 more strikingly costumed fighters erupt out of nowhere to fill the Nazi forces with a special kind of terror. It is obvious these opposing factions have met before, by the tremor in the Nazi voices as they bark their harsh commands, and by the beads of sweat that fall from their quivering chins when they realize their time has come. Ugh, I'll never be as confident as Black Condor. What a legend. Rescued by the Freedom Fighters, and wow, Uncle Sam can carry both Superman and the Elongated Man, they're taken back to their headquarters hidden behind a propaganda poster. And now we get an explanation as to what's going on, because the Earths are aligned year-wise, so it's 1973. And so the heroes really want to know, how is the war still going on? What happened? And this is not the most detailed-filled explanation, so if one is a really big history buff who's really into tracking the trajectory of the war and lots of the analyses about how it was a lost cause for the Axis anyway and a whole bunch of things, we're not going to get into any of that here. It's a sad tale. When our president had his fatal heart attack in 44, the governmental balance of power went the wrong way. By the time the USA had developed the atom bomb, Germany had one too. Since neither side was suicidal enough to use the blamed thing, the war just kept going on. A lot more men than had to died fighting for the cause of freedom. Good men, and true they were. And some of them were friends. No, not the Black Hawks and non-racially insensitive Chop Chop. It's interesting to see the examples they chose. They're most likely included there because they're also characters who are already in play in the main DC universe, or at least Black Hawks is still being published. It's kind of like those characters you recognize, they're dead. Now, Uncle Sam goes on to say that 5 years prior, everything suddenly just stopped. That the Reich came up with the ultimate weapon, a mind control ray. All except us, of course. We've developed immunity to the ray, and we've been fighting Adolf's orders as an underground strike force ever since. Dr. Fate is basically going, cool story, bro, but we don't know who you are. Which makes sense, because at this point in the history of these crises and the JLA JSA team-ups, it had been established that there could be a decent level of variance between the Earths. And so some people may not have counterparts, although when we go down years later, they're going to retroactively introduce the Freedom Fighters onto the other Earths and just kill them. R.I.P. Now, as for the origins of the Freedom Fighters, we get a splash page with a little blurb on each one. It's very Cliff Notes and rudimentary, but enough for new readers to get a taste, and people who knew them before likely already knew. Also, Phantom Lady is recreating the creation of Atom Pose reaching toward Black Condor. So these mind control rays, the Freedom Fighters not been able to find them because also there's a secondary ray that blocks out the ability to locate them. Well, Dr. Fate may not be up to full power, but he can help with this. Now, like most issues when they reintroduce characters, they do try and give each character a moment, but with this comic, it usually happens during the battle. But one of the characters who gets one outside of that is Black Condor, who is suspicious about just letting these strangers into their hideout and just showing them all their things and just going along with their plan. And he's treated like he is entirely unreasonable. Yeah, in a world overrun by Nazi mind control, why would you question anything? Get it together, Richard. Now, basically, to find out what they need to have a seance and hold hands and wish for what they want to know at the moment. And they discover 3 locations for these control machines. And you know what that means. We need some Gardner Fox style storytelling. They're going to split up into groups and each one's going to take one of the devices. Now, this storytelling format can be a bit repetitive. However, in this case, it does not prove to be because they change a couple of things and have the scenes build upon each other. Now, before they can split up, they have to leave Red Tornado behind so he can have more angst. Also, so there can be 12 of them, the tagline promised 12. Then the room is empty, save for a tattered flag that ripples in the light and a silent android who studies that flag curiously and wonders, for just a moment, if it is worth 12 valiant lives. So first up, and finishing up this issue, we have the team of Batman, Dr. Fate, the Ray, and the Human Bomb. They're going to Paris, and their mind control device is at the top of the Eiffel Tower. The Ray is shown to have a bit of an ego, says he can go up and take out the guards and there'll be no problem, so he heads up first. Of course, there are problems, and he has to call in reinforcements. And they were ready for many things, but not Deflator Mouse. I can't hear that without thinking about the tick. Deflator Mouse. Fighting Nazis means that the Human Bomb gets to take his gloves off because his powers are concentrated in his hands to make things explode. Now, once the soldiers are dealt with, it's time to confront the Great Machine, which creates some humanoids to fight them. It's giving Crisis on Earth A vibes, back when the evil Earth 1 Johnny Thunder had the Thunderbolt make giant creatures for the heroes to fight. Here, each one is tailored to a specific hero. The one for the Ray is pretty menacing, even though Dr. Fate is flat out satanic. Just the way that the Rays is absorbing light and looming over him, it ends up being pretty ominous. Now, despite this being a fairly routine villain tactic, it takes Dr. Fate a moment to realize, oh, we gotta swap partners. Once they do that, they easily defeat the creatures, but the machine is not done with them yet. If humanoids cannot be eliminated physically, they must be deactivated. Encephalo waves will halt all conscious mental activity. Projection, complete immobility. Conclusion, 99.786% successful. Percentage satisfactory. Projection, when guards reawaken, they'll transport humanoids to a public square. Put them on permanent exhibition. Object lesson, to reaffirm supremacy of Third Reich. to strengthen invincibility mythos, to reinforce the dream. Now, it turns out that percentage was not high enough. The heroes, even without conscious thought, stride forward to destroy the machine. So strong is their conviction and desire for freedom. And with an outro panel of Hal panicking back on Earth 1 that they're all dead, it's off the next issue, 13 Against the Earth, which has one of the classic Heroes Fighting Heroes covers. So you have one of those instant, ooh, why are they fighting kind of hooks? Also, especially if you read the last one, because they were all working together. What went wrong? The teaser page is very patriotic as Superman accuses the freedom fighters of betraying America, and is followed by Uncle Sam recapping the details. It's in a scene that makes it seem like he's about to become a wraparound kind of framing narration element, but it's not. It's just here for the beginning. We start properly on our next team. Earth 2 Superman, missing his hair streaks in the first couple of panels. Maybe because he's got a hood on. Doll Man, Green Arrow, and Phantom Lady in Fujiyama, Japan. The Japanese are eager to help them because after things started to go really well for the Nazis, they turned on them. And I couldn't help thinking about it because the big coats and the snow, Doll Man and Phantom Lady must be so cold. Now their machine is inside of a volcano. It starts drawing conclusions based on the battle that we saw in the last issue as to how it should proceed. And so it decides on another method. Threats. If they destroy it, it will destroy Japan. Superman does not believe and calls that by punching it, and then the island starts to get destroyed. So he flies off to stop that, as he should, because it's his fault. And meanwhile, the machine concludes those who remain won't be a problem. And this triggers Green Arrow, and they come up with the only type of plan you're going to come up with when you have Doll Man. You got to put the tiny person inside the machine to mess up all the wires, which is exactly what happens, and also they save the island. However, they note, as the first team also noted, that the mind control is still in place. It doesn't seem like it did anything. Which brings us to our last team, who are over at Mount Rushmore. We have Black Condor, Sandman, Uncle Sam, and the Elongated Man, and some very dramatic narration that I'm going to read because I'm fond of it. Shift your attention from Fujiyama to a mountain of quite a different sort, Mount Rushmore of Earth X. Since 1925, it has stood in the Black Hills of South Dakota as a monument to the men who helped to shape a nation. Now, it stands as a tribute to the mad-eyed ex-house painter who conquered that nation, and the rest of the world as well. Enter 4 gaudily costumed figures. By this time, we need not tell you why they are here. I tend to associate the term gaudy with negative attributes, such as it's too much, not just that it's ostentatious. So it amuses me to see it here. Like, they're over the top, it's too much. This team, for me, had the most interesting banter, again, because they took the time to establish a kind of contrary personality for Black Condor, but that's just me. Miles may vary. Now, how are you going to kill anybody when you're going to be so busy sleeping? Stop scaring people, Sandman. Effective, Sandman, but a little impersonal, if you know what I mean. Now me, I got a way of handling these Ratsies that's a heap more satisfying. Satisfaction should come from the result of our efforts, Uncle Sam, not the methods we use to attain them. That sounds a bit dangerous. Dark Black Condor when? What are you trying to do, Black Condor? Spoil all our fun? It's not every day a fella gets a chance to win World War II all over again. And so they come to the final machine, and this one makes a flame wall around itself. And once they vault it, they decide to deal with it, they need to punch it. Everybody punch. They are stunned that the just hit it method is not working until they realize that this isn't the real machine, it's a projection. I really want to see what they were actually punching. The real machine is hidden behind Hitler's face because it's been added to Mount Rushmore. Now punching it works. Uncle Sam only has to do one punch. However, while they succeeded in that endeavor, overall it doesn't seem like anything happened. The mind control is still in place. How do they know that? They just do. And it's when they return to the base that things just start to go wrong. First, we get it confirmed that the machines were an interlinked consciousness, and every time one of them was destroyed, it would pass on what it learned to the next one. And so that's why they were switching up strategies and why each fight was a little different. But the JSA and JLA members now wonder, why didn't destroying the machines work? And they conclude it's because Uncle Sam and the freedom fighters are traitors. They want the power for themselves. They betrayed America. The teaser page. It happened. I do like that the human bomb just goes, what are you gibbering about? It's Red Tornado who realizes what's going on. We're in a situation where he's both the cause of the problem because they ended up here and the solution because he solves it. In a callback to something they did set up last issue very early on, it's that the mind control machine is impacting the JLA and JSA. It just took a while because they don't have the same immunity that the freedom fighters have for reasons. This story would be strengthened if there was an actual reason why they were immune and not just cause. Now Red Tornado finds what was hidden. There is a 4th supercomputer, a giant Nazi satellite, and inside he encounters Hitler, who hits him with a "we're the same, you and I" kind of speech, and also the "join me and rule together" speech. We even get a "I'll never join you." And Red Tornado punches him in the face, a classic Golden Age callback. It was all the rage. Now there are some not so subtle clues in the dialogue in the build up to the reveal that this Hitler is an android, like when Red Tornado says that he has to deactivate him. What's really interesting is the reveal of the final machine behind him. Now that all the power is concentrated up in the secret satellite, that is revealed that the supercomputer usurped control from the Nazis, but since it was created by them and still considers itself a supreme intelligence, it's still operating under those parameters because it's got programmed in biases and it's just playing them out and maintaining control in that way. Exposition. Mind control mechanisms were created with superior intelligence, better able to rule the Earth. Result. Several years ago, this mechanism and the others took control from the Third Reich, replacing their leaders with android replicas to ensure the governmental shift would go unnoticed. This entire concept of the perpetuation of this system by machines is really quite chilling, and it still lands quite well, and it gives the story a bit of a different flair by veering it off in this more sci-fi direction. You still maintain the evil that men do angle because it's them who programmed the machine, but then you add this extra layer to it. Plus, you get a very strong moment with Red Tornado. He himself is a machine, and then he has to confront this and choose humanity, even in spite of how he's been being treated, choosing to embrace the potential for good rather than this potential for evil. Also, this is where the computer yells, "Crisis! Crisis! Crisis! Crisis!" Androids' whirling motions have upset satellite's delicate gyroscopic balance. Satellite is now in decaying orbit, falling back to Earth. Conclusion. Situation desperate. It is finished. Once again, a madman's dream dies in a blazing bunker. That was a pretty fire line from Red Tornado. I'm sad nobody else got to hear it. The story then wraps up really abruptly. We got one page. We're out of time. So there is not a long denouement about what's going to happen to this Earth or the kind of fallout, but that tends to be the norm for these stories. What happened with the whole layering of the mind control and how long it's going to take for that to wear off, whether people will accept that that's what happened, whether they will have internalized it. Just a whole bunch of interesting questions. Another time. The JLA and the JSA have to get hope, and they're going to use the AI brain from the mechanism to at least contact the Earth. They're not going to bring it back with them, thank goodness. Don't bring the Nazi AI back to Earth. Now, to establish contact, they basically need to click their heels together 3 times and think about home. And so they get to contact their worried counterparts, the Flash Jay Garrick and Green Lantern Hal Jordan. Jay was panicking less than Hal. And we end on Uncle Sam saying that maybe they'll see each other again, which they will in 1976 when the Freedom Fighters get their own series and they come over to Earth 1. So they'll see some of them again. We're also in the time period where people can cross over to other Earths. The Black Canary moved to another Earth in issue 74 because her husband Larry died so that everybody could be sad and so that she could move to Earth 1 and be used as a character over there and eventually have a romance with Green Arrow. But as for this issue, Crisis over. Crisis on Earth X is one that tends to be remembered largely because of the story beats behind it, the whole alternate Earth, this whole Nazi-controlled Earth. It's that line of alternate history that held a fascination for some, and it's been played out in multiple stories, and not just at DC. Now, seeing this concept coupled with classic quality wartime heroes is indeed a decent hook, although again, it's more the alternate history aspect that is endured than these specific characters being attached to it. You will see the concept of this Earth revisited throughout the eras. This is still a very historically significant issue for reintroducing these characters, and as a story, it has a solid and understated through line with Red Tornado and his artificial intelligence. It's not the dominant line, but for me reading it, it was the one I found the most interesting. Just his artificial nature as he seeks acceptance and equality with his team against the supercomputer that is forced compliance, programmed by a fascistic will. Free will versus control, playing out with these androids. There's the whole quest for identity that Red Tornado had been going through for a while, as he rejects the offer to assume the role of ruling machine. It's interesting, and again, not the focus, nor is the quiet, insidious idea of human beings' thoughts and ideologies being corrupted by the very machines they create, which is always relevant, but time recording feels extra pertinent. How one can create things that then end up shaping their own thought patterns, ending up in a kind of cycle. The mind control within the issue itself is much more of a classic sci-fi type, less than an explored insidious creep, but the idea itself is very compelling. And in terms of how the story is structured, it's very solid, and it manages to break up the whole Gardner Fox format in such a way that it keeps the momentum as a hook instead of feeling like you're just repeating things over and over. It feels like it builds. Now, in terms of reintroducing these characters, it's not the most riveting showcase for them all, and I say that as someone who really likes them. While it does bring them back and you get to see how they operate, they don't stand out as much as some other introductions. And some characters really don't feel like they get the same opportunity to come across as interesting. There were points where I forgot Dollman was even there. Still, it is really cool to see them again. And this would become a launching pad for them to become more used, and eventually some of them would spawn off some legacy characters too. An interesting thing about creating this alternate extended World War II world to put them on, while it makes sense, does end up also making them feel a bit tied to the era. So in some ways it makes them feel more out of time and perhaps less relevant, even if it's also a way to present them at their peak. It's interesting. Let me know what you think of it, because it's a decision I entirely understand, but I'm curious if in the long run it ended up hurting their longevity. The individual fights are fun and each have some interesting moments, and because the computers are transferring information, you get some different techniques. On the whole, it's a solid and memorable Crisis. It ends up having an almost Elseworlds, or in this case, imaginary tale kind of energy. And you can also see why why this title and world are taken and applied to other adaptational outings. And then now seeing the space, it can be interesting to go look and see what they pulled, how much of it came. This is one you can just kind of stay with for a while. It stands out. But those are just my thoughts. And not only do I want to hear yours, I want to hear what the people at the time thought. So as always, we're going to read some letters. And as always, the warning that some of these can get long, but it's worth it. So you can kind of get into the headspace and vibe of the time period. To the letters column. Dear editor, why, oh why did Len Wein feel he had to give the quality heroes an Earth of their own? It seems so foolish to go to such extremes. Now readers can find themselves eternally discombobulated. Woo! I like it. Discombobulated, knowing that somehow there exists 3 different Earths, all orbiting somewhere in the DC solar system. Earth 1, 2, and now Earth X. Oh, is this person gonna get roasted for missing some of the Earths? I'm sure it would have been no great task to work out some more original and plausible reason to fit the freedom fighters, as you now call the quality characters, into the annual JLA/JSA rendezvous. The story was good. Oh, was it? I couldn't tell. Despite the addition of another entire Earth to the joint, but it has become so pressing to create new and more exciting topics for the JLA/JSA team-ups. Perhaps it's time to discontinue the series and allow the Justice Society to slide back into limbo. Otherwise, should we plan on next year's venture consisting of a trip to Earth Z, where the JLA meets all of the old Fawcett heroes? Oh, Scott's not going to be happy when they go and meet the Fawcett heroes. Dear editor, Len Wein seems to believe in reviving old superheroes most of us have never heard of. As the 6 Fawcett superheroes in JLA number 107, I think it is unfortunate that this particular story will run 2 issues. In general, the modern heroes are better than the old ones, and the 4 issues left before the next team up are not enough to give them adequate development. The story is common enough, but Len Wein is handling it beautifully. He has chosen an interesting way to split up the unwieldy Justice League, which is too large to operate as a unit. I'm not going to read all of this one because all of these are long. Also, I just kind of wanted to see if the editor was going to roast this person for getting where the characters came from wrong. This person then goes on to talk about who they feel should or should not be on the Justice League. Ooh, he got community noted. Ooh, hold on. Information note. The Freedom Fighters, as we've called them, were originally published by the Quality House, not Fawcett. And as for Aquaman testing his water wings, watch the seas around Adventure Comics sometime in the future. That was much nicer than past roastings. Let's get some positivity up in here. Dear editor, JLA 108's 13 Against the Earth concluded the best JLA JSA epic in the last 5 years. Why do I rave over such a common everyday comics tale? Because there was no death of a major character or some such tragedy. The annual team up between the 2 worlds' heroes usually brings about such an occurrence. Witness last year's deaths of Wing and Red Tornado and the death of Larry Lance in issue number 74. The story by Len Wein was the perfect comic story. Excellent dialogue, a tight plot, and a twist ending prove that Len is one of DC's best authors. After cutting down a little more on dialogue per panel, I feel he will be the best. After all, there were only 11 panels in number 108 that didn't contain dialogue. When you have 2 excellent artists like Dick Dillon and Dick Giordano drawing for you, there is no reason why there aren't more wordless panels. The artwork flows smoothly throughout the entire story and can do without excess dialogue. We got room for one more. I have it in me for one more. Let's go. Dear editor, take the idea of an Earth where the Nazis won World War II, add 6 quality superheroes defunct lo these many years, stir in 2 relatively new Justice Leaguers, include the Justice Society, or at least a few members of it, and don't forget to have at least 1 regular JLAer along. Pour mix into 2 issues of Justice League. What do you got? 2 awfully crowded and rushed issues of JLA and a lot of unused idea potential. Len Wein's hubris is showing. If he thought he could get all that into 2 issues and make a really successful story out of it, better he and you had done it as a 3-parter, even though that would have used up half a year's worth of JLA now. Or perhaps at least you could have done it in 2 regular issues of JLA rather than the JLA JSA numbers. What after all the JSA as such contribute to the story other than adding to the general overcrowding? The plot was held together largely by spit, baling wire, and cliches, especially in the second half. After a series of very ordinary fights with the mind control machines in which the quality heroes did not get the chances they deserved to show off their abilities and personalities, we have a fight between our heroes and the quality ones, just to keep the story creaking along. The Red Tornado saves the day by wasting the monster machine that has, for no particular convincing reasons, taken over from the Nazis. Green Lantern used to be in charge of the last-minute saves in JLA. Now the Tornado gets most of them and produces the Deus Ex Machina to get the JLAers and JSAers home. Wow. The story was reasonably enjoyable even so. Len Wein's skillful scripting can do a lot to cover up plot defects, but Len, try to put in each story just the details and characters that you think you can develop, and then go ahead and develop them. Wow. Oh, nothing changes. Nothing changes. Lots of thoughts about Crisis on Earth X. Let me know if you want to come back and do a kind of comparison now that we've laid the foundation to some of the adaptations. If you're ready for the next crisis, I will put the vote for some of the ones we had to skip inside of the members tab, and let me know, where do you rank this crisis? Did you like it? Does it stand out to you? Does it not? Depending upon when you read this, perhaps you had read many stories with this kind of alternate history and it may not have been as interesting. So please, as always, do all the YouTube things, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking us on to spend comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye.